So here's the rule. Dungeon Master's facts are facts.
Yes. I can see the irritation on your face as I interrupt you here. I will try not to do it again. But
No,
I just
look.
wanted to point out those two things. And I'm like, look, Wikipedia, it's funny that we're like putting so much store in it.
If I'm using different sources for each different movie, then it could get confusing, or the sources could be weird.
You
and look,
have to justify
I want to bring
it to
something
me.
up. You didn't want to do pleasantries before we did this podcast, and now it seems you want to do nothing but pleasantries in the middle of my facts.
Okay, look, I'm just gonna. It's buttoned. Don't worry about it.
All right. Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Can you tell I've just watched WrestleMania?
I can tell that.
Welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me is...
the fighting, perhaps sentient robot.
He's definitely not sentient. It's definitely a little boy's imagination seeing human characteristics inside a non-human thing.
Well, look, we're going to talk about it because this week we watched Real Steel, the 2011...
realest of steels.
The 2011 fun film starring Hugh Jackman and directed by Sean Levy. So why don't we get into it? This was my pick, so I am more than happy to hit you with some lovely synopsis.
Hit me. Was that deliberate?
Let's say it was. It wasn't, but let's just say it was, because I feel like it's a better segue than whatever I was going to do. So in Real Steel, former boxer Charlie Kenton, played by Hugh Jackman, struggles to survive in a near future where human fighters have been replaced by large robots. Broke and deep in debt from gambling, Charlie drifts through the underground robot boxing scene, barely scraping by. When his ex dies, he reluctantly takes custody of his estranged son, Max, who is 11 years old, and Charlie plans to sell custody back to the boy's aunt. But things change when Max discovers Atom, a discarded sparring robot with a mysterious resilience. See, maybe he is sentient, you don't know. With the help of Bailey, Charlie's old friend and the daughter of his former trainer, played by Evangeline Lilly, they fix up Atom and begin to win fights. As Max forms a deep bond with Atom, Charlie slowly reconnects with both his son and his fighting spirit. Atom eventually takes on the undefeated champion of the robot games, Zeus, losing the match but earning the respect of the world, and really, isn't that more important? And of course, Charlie wins something that he never bet on, which was a second chance at being a father. Look, ChatGPT gave me that really corny final line, and I almost took it out, and then I went, no.
No, because it is the movie.
It's the movie. That's part of the charm. So, and I do say charm, I'm not making fun of it here, but hit me with some statistics so that we can get into our analysis of this cinematic delight.
Released in 2011, directed by Sean Levy, Cheaper by the Dozen, The Internship, and Date Night. Written by John Gattens, who wrote... I am a huge fan of, even though I know it didn't do well and a lot of people don't like it, the 2017 Rangers movie, starring Hugh Jackman, Dakota...
I'm going to pause you there, because first draft, I believe, was by Dan Gilroy. So we got to mention Dan.
All I'm saying is the credited Wikipedia writer is John Gattens. Starring Hugh Jackman, Dakota Goyo, Evangeline Lilly, Anthony Mackie, and Kevin
Durant. I'm just going to pause you again. I just love that you love to cite Wikipedia as like the gospel for like Wikipedia says it. So
here it is, right? It's like I as a side thing, I do Dungeons and Dragons and I am the Dungeon Master. So here's the rule. Dungeon Master's facts are facts.
Yes. I can see the irritation on your face as I interrupt you here. I will try not to do it again. But I just wanted to point out those two things. And I'm like, look, Wikipedia, it's funny that we're like putting so much store in it.
Here's the deal. I only use Wikipedia for consistency's sake, right? Because if I'm using different sources for each different movie, then it could get confusing, or the sources could be weird.
You have to justify.
I want to bring something up. You didn't want to do pleasantries before we did this podcast, and now it seems you want to do nothing but pleasantries in the middle of my facts.
Okay, look, I'm just gonna. It's buttoned. Don't worry about it. Continue to hit me with some maybe perhaps not quite accurate Wikipedia facts, and I will just button this down. And I'm here for it, okay?
Thank you so much for allowing me to continue. Kevin Durant, I finished on. Music by You're probably going to tell me it's by somebody else first, but Danny Elfman. Runtime of 128 minutes. I don't have the seconds, unfortunately, if you want to be really accurate. Budget of 110 mil. I'm probably sure that's $1 or $2 off. And box office of 300 mil. I did round that slightly up. I do apologize. Was that good enough for you?
Look,
I feel like the son of Charlie trying to get my dad's approval right now because I feel like I'm not good enough.
Well, look, just keep that energy.
All right, so this movie's awesome. I've
Yeah.
seen this movie before. This movie is the epitome of fun. It is a mix between Rocky. It is the Rocky story, Rocky 1 specifically, and what I call he's not going to say dad till the end movies.
Yeah.
It's that story of like a family member who won't recognize the other family member, but through it they both learn something, and the biggest prize of all is him calling him dad.
Yeah.
This is a
You're
great
not
movie.
wrong. You're not wrong. Look, I love Real Steel. Real Steel was a movie that I saw at the cinemas and I had incredibly low expectations. It was one of those movies where it was at a time in my life when I was young, I was single, and I would go see just about everything at the movies, whether I thought it was going to be good or not. And I remember I was probably half an hour into Real Steel, and I started to sort of sit up in my chair and I went, actually, I'm having a really good time. This is a lot of fun, and it was not a movie where I was expecting that to take place. And obviously that was back in 2011. It's been a minute since then for this film. So, and yeah, I thought it was time to talk about it, particularly because we just watched The Electric State, and The Electric
These
State.
robots are so much better.
Yeah, The Electric State just made me think of Real Steel, and I was like, we're doing a lot of the same stuff, but we did it better back here. Now, I will say as well, I don't think this movie is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and there's a few things about it that do irritate me. By and large, this is a movie where when you look at the story and when you look at the familiar ground that we're trotting here or treading on here, if you like, it's a movie that doesn't really have any right to be as good as it is, which speaks to that whole idea, kind of like Electric State. It's a bit like that reverse of The Electric State, where I'm like, the execution of this fairly conventional idea is so good here that it really elevates the entire product, in my opinion.
It's really surprising. You're right. It has so many of the same ingredients as our previous film, The Electric State. But what really caught me the most was the robots felt like they belonged in the world in this movie. You look at it and it holds up incredibly well. When you consider the work they're doing on these robots in this film to make them, put them on screen, and like 10 to 15 years has gone, and we've had more graphics and more developments and more pushes and technology, and this still doesn't feel out of place. They're very much kind of banking on the whole, like, I suppose, Transformers kind of look of things and all that sort of stuff. But what I really like too is, and I didn't realize I was missing it from The Electric State, the lighting off of the robots. The lighting and the way they interact with the world made it so much more immersive in a movie that is 15-foot tall robots just walking around and doing professional sports in this world. It shouldn't be immersive, but it is, and it works.
That's sort of a good segue to talk a bit about the setting and about the lighting. So the cinematographer here is Mauro Fior, and it probably won't surprise you that he has worked on a number of big budget movies, but the one that really, I draw an arrow pretty much straight from that to this, is Michael Bay's The Island, from the mid 2000s. So this movie absolutely has a lot of the signature Michael Bay elements in terms of the way that it's lit. Not so much so in perhaps the way it's shot and edited. Sorry, but definitely the lighting. When I say shot, I'm more talking about camera movement there. It's got more conventional camera movement and less frenetic camera movement than we usually see from Michael Bay, but we definitely see Michael Bay's signature sunset drenched lighting here, as well as a really solid commitment to standard sort of interesting visual fundamentals, like building our frame with foreground elements that are out of focus. Then we have our in focus mid-ground before we have our background, which is again out of focus. That layered effect, very much Michael Bay, as well as the lighting there. And look, that's Mauro Fior. Like, he's doing a really good job. He also shot all of James Cameron's Avatar movies. So he's someone who really knows his way around this sort of high budget filmmaking style. And you take that, and then you take the sense of Americana that they're going for here. Yeah. And this movie is really, again, I hate to keep comparing it to Electric State. I will stop doing that soon. But the idea that we were talking about in Electric State of saying, what's the setting? What's the feeling? Yeah. And this movie's like, this is the feeling. This is the setting. It's American Midwest. We're looking at, factory towns. We're looking at blue collar. We got oil rigs in the background. We've got, little country fairs and farming, rural. This is what we're looking at here. And then, of course, on this film as well, you've also got the influence of Spielberg, who was in there as a producer. And why do the robots look so good? They had real reference. Real reference is the ball game in terms of visual effects. If you have even a model of the robot that is life-size but doesn't move, your visual effects artists are in heaven, because the light behaves well and gives them perfect reference for when that thing does move in the CGI world. So it had a lot of things going for it in terms of a visual style. The last thing I want to say on that is I feel like this is a really transitional film for Sean Levy. So I'm not quite sure on the pronunciation there on his last name, by the way.
I'm not either. I realized I didn't look it up before it, and it seems simply spelt, but you're right. It has multiple ways you could probably say it. So.
I mean, I know him well in terms of his work, but I rarely speak his name out loud. So, but look, he was up to this point, he was really much more doing sort of a bit more standard kind of commercial work, like romantic comedies and Night at the Museum and that sort of thing. And this is a real transition into that sort of slightly more teenage kind of tone. And I think he really picked up a lot of stylistic elements that he would then carry into the next part of his career. So it's pretty cool on that front. And I know that was a long one from me, so I'll let you talk now.
No, and look, I do joke. I try to pick either movies that they're not super famous for or a bit out of their kind of current wheelhouse. But yeah, he did all the Night at Museums. He did recently Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, he is a person who is in demand. And you're right, you do see the beginnings of these visual flares in this movie. And I do want to double down on, all I could think in this movie was, this giant robot movie is grounded. Like, it sits in itself comfortably. Like, throughout the whole movie, I'm like, this is grounded, this is crazy, how does this work so well? And I'd seen it before, and I knew I liked the movie. But what I was really trying to do this time is drill down to why I like it. And I think it's one of those movies that it is formulaic in that it's trying to hit emotional beat here, growth here, emotional beat here. And you can predict the ending of this movie very early on without much knowledge of what's going to happen. But it's not that type of movie. It's not a movie that is punished because of that. It's a movie that allows you to just have fun and go on the ride. You walk up to the roller coaster, you see where the track goes. You can still go on the ride and enjoy it. And this is what this movie is. You're going on the ride just to enjoy it. All week, I was like, hey man, to everyone I've seen, have you seen Real Steel? You should watch Real Steel. I just watched it again. It's the greatest movie. You should watch it. It's super fun. If you just want a movie night, Real Steel, that's your movie. Let's do it. Like, that was just me on repeat. And you're right. It's corny in parts, and there are some underwritten roles. And I think something I've brought up before in movies, it kind of has a bit of a villain problem. It's like, this guy's bad and this guy's bad, but they're only bad because Charlie put himself in that position, so they're not really bad guys. Like, so, I mean, and it's like the end fight with Zeus, they're not really bad guys, they're just the corporation, if you will, and they're the man, and you got to take down the man, and you're the underdog. But I was just like, this is amazing. And I was thinking, where did this come from? Because yes, it's pretty simple, but it felt inspired. And it turns out it was inspired from a Twilight Zone episode, which is amazing that the Twilight Zone all those years ago still inspires stories and fiction, by the way.
I think if you go back further, I'm pretty sure, and Twilight Zone did this a lot too. I think it was a short
It
story
was a
to
short
Twilight
story, yeah.
Zone to now feature film. But yeah, I think you're right in the sense that this movie doesn't have a strong villain. It does have a number of light antagonists, if you
Yes,
like.
an antagonist is
So
the correct word.
but it doesn't really have a strong villain. But again, I don't really feel like that is a problem for the film. What I think this film really gets by on is knowing what it is and delivering that to the audience with real energy and charisma. This is a movie where really all of the characters who you are supposed to like, which is most of the characters, are just played with that uber charisma, grounded and anchored, if you like, by Hugh Jackman leading the way at his most frenetic. There's not a huge amount for him to play in the sense that we know who this character is, but we can see him play it to within an inch of its life in terms of taking it seriously and giving it all of his absolute stage presence and energy. And that really lifts all of the material, which again, I'll say again, the material is not bad. It's just that the material is somewhat formulaic. So therefore, the execution becomes all important. And it's like everybody knew that. Everybody involved is like, we've got to play this way or it doesn't work because the audience has seen a lot of this stuff before.
I want to say I'm super glad you brought up energy because Hugh Jackman's energy in this film is so heightened. It is so big and so outward. And I think it's actually really important because his character, as written, is
Mm.
severely unlikable for a good chunk of this film. And if it wasn't played with such high energy, you would kind of be dragged down by it. You would kind of get sunk into it. But because of the energy and the frenetic pace and the kind of projection he puts on it, you kind of just bounce off it a little bit and keep going with the role. Also, the child actor in this film, Dakota Goyo, is spectacular. He is just charisma. And I think Hugh Jackman playing off him the way he did allowed a lot of that to happen. But the kid's line delivery and his kind of cool, calm, like he knows in the story, he knows exactly what he's getting out of this. He's not like confused by it. He's not like anything. And he is idealistic in hoping there's possibly something more he can get. But to a certain extent, he goes toe to toe with Hugh Jackman in this movie. And I'm sad to say, it looks like in real life the actor's retired. He kind of stepped away from cinema. He was in a lot of stuff as a kid and ads and movies and things like that. And then he kind of just went, nah, I don't want to be an actor. I'm going to do something else. Which good on him if that makes him happy. But yeah, it's a bit sad that you kind of going to get to see this guy do more as an adult because I would have really liked to see how he kind of transitioned into that role.
Yeah. And I think the supporting cast around those two is great as well. Evangeline Lilly's great, Kevin Durant's great in there as the sort of the villain from the
Sleazy
fair,
gambler dude,
yep.
yeah.
And look, Electric State callbacks again. Anthony Mackie, right? Okay, he's here as the fight promoter. This was an earlier role from my recollection for Anthony Mackie. It's one of the
Yeah.
first times I saw him, and it does sort of remind me a bit of what we used to get with an Anthony Mackie performance, which was again a lot of charisma, a lot of smiles, a lot of winking, and a really fun time. He's sort of moved away from that a little bit now as he's tried to etch out a bit more of a leading man persona. But I do kind of miss this Anthony Mackie a little bit. I felt a little bit the same way, can I just say, with Chris Evans. Chris Evans
Yeah.
used to, and they both went on to be Captain America. So there's your link for you.
Well, the
But
Marvel connection in this film is insane, though.
mm,
Like Hugh Jackman, Evangeline Lilly, Anthony Mackie, the director, like
yeah,
Kevin Durant is in like the Wolverine movies. There's a lot of like future Marvel DNA, even though like obviously Hugh Jackman was already Wolverine by this point, but like it's really kind of interesting to see like these people kind of weave in and out and kind of come back and connect in other places.
yeah. I look, we've talked a lot about the things that we like. I feel like I want to just dive in a little bit to some of the things that I do lament. But again, I'm going to call this a 90-10 in that sense.
Yeah.
I'm 90% on board and I got 10% just some things where I'm like, it wouldn't have been hard if we had adjust, like, so let's just talk about that 10% for a second. And like I said, I don't think it really affects the movie all that much, but I put my story hat on and I see a few things, and one of the big things that I see, probably the biggest thing that does sort of get me a bit, is we spend the first 30 minutes of this movie. You could even argue it's closer to the first 45, right? But because Adam doesn't appear until the 45-minute mark. But really, what we're doing in that first 30 to 45 minutes is we're getting to know Charlie, Hugh Jackman's Charlie. And it is repeated time and time again that, as they even say in the film, he's a bad bet. He is a gambler, and not a gambler in a Han Solo roguish kind of way. He has a gambling problem. Like, he is unable to stop betting money that he doesn't have. Like,
His
this isn't
solution to getting out of gambling is gambling.
exactly. So it's not like it's a throwaway line or it's not a devil may care thing. It's like a genuine character flaw that we spend an awful lot of time on. And if we're going to do that, then it makes sense for that to actually be something that the character then needs to overcome late in the story. And instead, what happens is that just drifts away and becomes less of a problem because he finds this connection with his son. It's not actually stated that he will make better choices now. He just stops gambling and stops taking side bets. And it's something that it just kind of bugs me, because I'm like, that's a lot of structural time setting up a very specific character flaw that we are. And the other thing that kills me, Ben, is the solution actually benefits additional characters who are already in the movie. Who is a character who is really good with money and also needs to reconnect with Charlie? Well, that's Evangeline Lilly's Bailey character, right? Perfect opportunity for her to actually enter the movie as a bit more than just a love interest by saying, the financial guys, okay, you're 11 and you're a gambler. I'm doing the finance. This is my role here, right? And suddenly we have this trio, this surrogate family, and everything hums for me a little bit more. And I'm just like, this movie is one where I look at it and I go, it's right there. It's right
But Jim,
there.
he solves it by not quitting gambling, but by gambling on family and
Yeah.
love. Evangeline Lilly's character, you're correct. That would have made her much more interesting, because effectively she is a minor love interest and a tool just to explain that her dad used to coach Charlie. And does she mention it quite a lot? That was my, like, yeah, you bring up kind of like that story, but that was part of it for me. Is like this, you're literally giving this actress two things to base her character on, or three. She doesn't trust Charlie. Her dad used to coach Charlie, and she loves Charlie. Like it, and she says those things in
Yes.
different ways repeatedly. It's not like she acts them, she says them. And I mean, like, that's just kind of like, it feels like it's ticking a box. And you're right, it doesn't ruin the film at all. But if we're going to watch a film and we're going to talk about a film, I think it's important that we do that. Writing of a character, however minor, is important. And it also makes you kind of think, was there more and it got cut from the script or from the final edit or from all those things? But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a bit of a shame.
it's tricky, and it does have a call and response within the film. Obviously, when we get towards what we'd call the end of the second act, and Charlie gets beat up by some of his, by Kevin Durant's character from his past life where he's making all these bad bets, then yes, okay, so there is sort of a payoff for that plot line, somewhat, which then launches us into the
Third
breakup of
act, yeah.
the father son, if you like. But again, like I say, it's a in a weird way, it's a super minor thing. And in another way, I'm like, no, you decided to spend 40 minutes on it. So you decided it wasn't a minor thing, And it's something that I think about. The other thing that I think about, if we're talking about little quibbles, is how do these robots work, Ben? How do they work?
Yeah, no, I can explain this. Okay, so basically they plug them into a cord and that gives them power, but obviously quite a lot of power. But some of them don't hold as much power. And then they have like remote control car controls that can control four limbs independently of each other and all these sort of things. It's really quite simple and is
But
consistent throughout the film.
yeah, but not only that, I mean, sometimes it's voice controlled and that's fine in all types of matches. And
Sometimes
sometimes
it's just shadow controlled.
Sometimes it's shadow control, which is also totally allowed. Sometimes it is 100% AI controlled, and we've programmed the robot to make all of the decisions, and that is also okay.
Sometimes it's two people controlling it. Because it has two heads. That makes sense, right?
So again, it's something where it's when we get to that final fight, it's a little bit comical in some ways how much they have to lean on the commentators to actually explain the stakes of what we're seeing, because the rules of how we deal with the robots and how they fight are constantly being rewritten. So therefore they must be constantly explained to the audience as to what's allowed and what's not allowed in any given situation, or what is supposed to be, something that is breathtaking and unusual versus something that is run of the mill, because we don't know, like,
It
when we're
actually
actually
makes
watching the film.
more sense when they're in like the dirt leagues, when they're in the street level, because you're like, oh, well, they're dirty or they're cheating or that's just how it is. But yeah, when you get to like a worldwide formal event where like people, this is televised, I'm guessing, around the world, you're right. It feels a bit like, I mean, the commentators were 100% necessary and they make it. I mean, I think they're good commentators too, actually. But yeah, it is interesting. It's unlike Rocky, where you kind of just get the boxing and that kind of tells its story and you get people's reactions. Yeah, you do need the commentators. You're right. The rules are a bit flimsy.
Yeah, it's but look, those are two things. Like a little bit of a bump on some of the character stuff with Charlie, where that flaw perhaps doesn't quite get its due or its payoff, and then a little bit of some, I don't know, sorcery around how these robots are actually controlled.
Yeah, I was going to say the realistic thing is if this was real steel, if it is, the newest robot would always win.
Yes.
Because you just build the next robot to beat the next robot. Like the closest equivalent to this in real world is like I don't know if you ever watched it, Robot Wars. They're
Yes,
like
I
when the
did.
people build
Yes.
robots and that sort of stuff. The newer robot usually won. There was very rarely carryover champions, but you let all that go in this movie because it moves at a nice pace. The actors and characters are enjoyable. The world you're sitting in is interesting and constantly giving you something new to learn. The dialogue is at most times quippy and fun and kind of really enjoyable banter throughout it. And it just feels familiar and comfortable.
And it looks great. It looks
It
great
looks
too.
so good. Like
Yeah.
Electric State, we said we weren't going to speak about it anymore, was a $300 million movie. And this was 110 million. Like, swap those two numbers, and that's more believable to me. Like,
Yeah.
like, and look, they're going for different looks. They're going for different styles. They're going for different attempts. There's more on the screen in Electric State. There are many, many factors. But to the average cinema going audience, they don't think like that. They just think that looked good. I enjoyed that. And I think, it's pure fun popcorn filmmaking. That's it. It's popcorn filmmaking. You're there to enjoy it. You're not there to think. You're not there to critique it. It's kind of like just fun, man. Just so
Yeah.
fun.
And that's where, like, that's why I didn't want to do too much on, some maybe holes or maybe some niggles, because it's like, that's not what this movie is about. This movie gets through on that execution and it does it really well. And look, it holds up. I hadn't seen it for a while and I was watching it again and I'm like, no, this is all the fun that I remember. This is all the emotion that I remember. This is all of the Americana that I remember and that I enjoy seeing on the screen. Like, this was a good time.
The movie's full of life in every sense, even the robots, even Atom. I have to admit something. Ever since this movie came out, I've had that robot's name wrong. I thought it was Adam.
Well, they deliberately,
Yeah,
that's quite. It's a deliberate kind of play on words a little
yeah,
bit there, because they are, and I was joking at the very top of the podcast, there's a very slight, I guess, hint, that we could be, look, this robot is
yeah.
special. Why is this robot special? Like, we're dancing with the idea that there could be some level of sentience there, but it's very, very under the radar. And there's a number of things in this film where you sort of go, we could tease that in a sequel. We could pull that thread in a sequel. We could, and there's a number of different elements there that we could look at. But in a way as well, perhaps because of some of the inconsistencies at play in the way this world is built, it's kind of nice that it just stands alone on its own at the moment. Like, there's nothing to sort of mess with it or sort of muck up its internal workings further with a string of sequels to try and explain bits and
People
pieces.
involved have expressed interest, most of the major players, even the director. But the director himself has even gone on record for other stuff saying, like, he's really hesitant to make sequels because he's of the opinion that a sequel has to match or beat the first. And he goes, if I can't do that, or I feel like I can't do that, then I'm not going to do it. They'd also have to recast the kid. They couldn't obviously use the same actor, but they could easily age him up or anything like that. But yeah, I think not necessarily a sequel, but something else in this world would be awesome. A different story that exists in the same world as this kind of Americana boxing robot. I think that would be awesome. It doesn't need the same characters. The characters, in a way, even though interesting and you connect to them, are a bit superfluous to this story in this world. The world feels larger than them. So,
yeah, there's plenty of places to go story wise here, and it would be pretty cool to see either an extension or a totally different set of characters in this world. But look, I hope you enjoyed the journey. It sounds like you did. I would like to hear where the journey is going to continue. So before we do that, could you maybe tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find us if they're hoping to connect? Just like Adam connected with Charlie, you could connect with us.
Here's what we're going to do. Look at me. Look at me. I don't know if you're in there, but look at me. You can get ready to rumble with us in multiple places. YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Put that in, you'll find us. You'll see all our podcasts, all our history. Like, comment, subscribe. Go watch your favorite movies that we've already talked about. Tell us your favorite movies that we should talk about. You can find us on social media. I've been a bit lax on those. I am going to try and get back on that. But Instagram is Jim_and_Ben, and TikTok is Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Please, please, please interact with us, because we do this because we like talking to each other about movies. And the only thing better than us talking to each other about movies, considering Jim always picks on me about my facts and things, would be talking to you guys about movies. A safer place, I feel like, is with the internet, which I thought I'd never say. But anyway, on to next podcast's film. I struggled. We've kind of, in the past, you've done it, I've done it, gone on a theme, tried to connect movies a little bit, or were inspired by previous movies. I haven't gone this route this time. But what I have done is I've picked two movies. And the reason I've picked these two movies is whenever somebody asks me the question, what's your favorite movie? I always have a lot of struggle telling them, because I have different movies for different occasions. And I have all these different things that I criteria as. I say rainy day movie, a movie I could watch over and over again, or a brilliant movie, but I could only ever watch it once. These two movies I always get reminded of as a part of this conversation, and I think I'm an idiot because I didn't think of them first, because I love them. I think they're brilliant. They are easily rotating somewhere in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So here's how we're going to do it. These movies are on a list I found of the top 150 best movies of all time, as rated by the group of people that are on this website.
That's just as good as grabbing our stats from Wikipedia.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you the website. I'll tell you the website afterwards, because I don't want to influence possibly what thing. I want you to pick either number 21 or number 41.
Okay. Let's pick 41.
The 41st best film of all time, according to Letterboxd, is The Truman Show.
Okay.
We will be watching The Truman Show next podcast.
Nice. I like a bit of Truman Show. So, yeah, I can definitely get on board with that one. And it's been a while since I watched The Truman Show, so perfect.
Also, a bit more story-wise than our previous two movies to dig into here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
it's very different vibes to go from Real Steel to Truman Show.
Yeah. Now, as I'm looking at this camera and now suddenly become paranoid, thank you for joining us, because you're watching us, and are you watching me elsewhere? I don't know. But anyway, see you next week as we talk about The Truman Show. Thank you very much.
Bye.